Okay, so apologies to Clippers fans on this one. The last decade or so has been pretty okay to them. I mean, even this move here didn't end up really blowing up in their face because they traded for Chris Paul in the same offseason. But I do want to talk about the time that they traded the pick that became Kyrie Irving. So, February 24th, 2011, Clippers are not good, and they want to get off of Baron Davis's money, so they trade him and their unprotected first-round pick, which was already definitely a lottery pick when they moved it, for Mo Williams, Jamario Moon expiring money, right? And the pick ends up being Kyrie Irving. Now, the first thing to think about with this, to me at least, is that the Clippers clearly did not believe that that pick was going to be anything special. I mean, they finished the 2011 season with 32 wins. So they were projected to have about the 8th pick in the draft. And it's difficult to find consensus opinions about the 2011 draft now, but after looking through some mock drafts, it seemed like the expectation was if you were around there, you were going to be going for somebody like Brandon Knight or Alec Burks. One person on Bleacher Report, I want to get their name because they end up being a little bit of a prophet here. Their name is Paul, and then it starts with a K, and I feel like I'm going to mispronounce it if I try to say it. They had Kawhi projected number 8, which I think is the highest that I've seen Kawhi in the 2011 draft. But even then, Kawhi couldn't shoot, right? So, okay, the belief if you're the Clippers is, well, yeah, we're trading this pick, but we don't think the player we're going to get is going to be that awesome. And then it becomes the number 1 pick in the draft. That's pretty rough. Now, regardless of that happening, you still are really rolling the dice when you just give away that valuable of an asset. Because we don't know if the Clippers, let's just say it did become the 8th pick in the draft. It ended up exactly where it was projected to go. They could have picked Kawhi. They could have picked Klay Thompson. So I know when people talk about this trade that it always goes back to Kyrie, but there were some star players that were picked. Now, they could have ended up selecting Jimmer Fredette, and it's all for nothing, but I guess that's just the mentality that they had was, well, we could get some random 8th pick who's maybe good, maybe not good, or we could get off of this money, and we could go into free agency. And that was a big thing. They wanted to get off of the money. The thing was, the 2011 free agent class, it wasn't loaded. It was good. I mean, Marc Gasol was the best player. This is a decade ago Marc Gasol, so more athletic, things like that. Tyson Chandler, Nene, David West, Aaron Aflalo, Thad Young. It was a solid free agent class, but was it good enough to warrant trading away a top 10 pick? No, that's become pretty obvious. But now, I guess if we're going to play the what-if game, do the Clippers still trade for Chris Paul if they've drafted Kyrie Irving? So, we're thinking about Kyrie, Eric Gordon, who at this time is thought of to be the next star player, Blake Griffin. It's a young, exciting team that probably doesn't make the playoffs. And then what happens to Chris Paul? I mean, would the league eventually come around on letting him get traded to the Lakers? Does he get traded to the Celtics? I know that was a thing for a little bit, the Rondo for CP conversation. I don't really know. I remember a little bit, like, the teams that Chris Paul had on his radar were like the Blazers and the Warriors or something. I don't totally know. I don't know what ends up happening with Chris Paul. But he certainly, well, I mean, not certainly, but you have to imagine he doesn't end up with the Clippers if they've now drafted Kyrie Irving. But even then, if you want to do the alternate reality, if we run this thing back again, the pick probably doesn't end up number 1, you know what I mean? So it depends on how deep you want to go, because now if they've drafted some 8th pick guy, like maybe they've selected Brandon Knight or Kemba Walker, then they probably still do the Chris Paul trade. If they've traded for Klay Thompson or Kawhi Leonard, then yeah, you imagine that. And hell, one of those guys may even be in the move. I mean, you can really create like a million different spider webs of outcomes if you do this what-if game hard enough. Another thing to think about, too, is that they probably don't hire Doc Rivers. I mean, it depends. Like, how quickly do Blake and Kyrie and whoever else build up to being pretty good? I mean, the reason Doc went to the Clippers is because of Chris Paul, you know? Yeah, the team was good, but it was CP as the main guy. And I mean, Kyrie's awesome, no doubt about that. But when you're talking about Kyrie Irving a couple of years into his career, as opposed to prime Chris Paul, I just don't know if somebody like Doc would just be like, yep, get me to that team. So then, who is the coach of the Clippers? Well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, Vinny Del Negro was not good, so maybe they hire somebody who knows what they're doing, maybe they don't. The other thing to think about is Kyrie. Like, at what point did Kyrie really take off as a player? I think everyone realized how good he was by his third year. Well, really his second year. But his third year, which is the season you would expect he would average like 27 a game, he had a lot of guys who took shots from him, like Luol Deng and Dion and Jarrett Jack and just random dudes like that. So if we talk about this new Clippers team, Blake and Eric Gordon, they're going to be taking a few shots. And this also means in this reality that the Clippers have to deal with the fact that Eric Gordon ends up being a disappointing 16 points a game guy. Unless in this new reality he doesn't get hurt because he barely played in the 2012 season. I don't know. Again, you can wrap your head around so many scenarios, but even so, you figure Eric Gordon's a nice enough fit next to Kyrie and Blake, and DeAndre Jordan is still around in this scenario. So the Clippers would still be good. It's just Doc probably doesn't come over. Maybe he still does. Who really knows? And I'm sure the Clippers go on some playoff runs. And I mean, while I think Chris Paul has had a better career than Kyrie and all that, we've seen what Kyrie can do when he's really rolling. And does that mean that the Clippers could have gone farther in some playoff series or something? Potentially. I mean, I think Chris Paul does so much that doesn't show up in the box score that simply saying, well, Kyrie could put up 30 in a series doesn't immediately make him better than CP against insert tough Western Conference opponent. But at the same time, when you can score 30 or 40 or whatever, it can be a big deal. I guess another thing to think about is, what if the Clippers drafted Kyrie and then still traded for Chris Paul? The first thing is, would they be able to do it? I mean, yeah, the original trade was like a T-Wolves pick and Aminu and Eric Gordon and whatever else. But in this new scenario, would the Hornets, would they be like, no, we need Kyrie Irving? You know, that'd be kind of interesting. Like, how would that whole thing go? Chris Kaman was in that move as well, for whatever that's worth. Shout out to Chris Kaman. I feel like nowadays a team would do a move like that, whereas back then it was a little more, well, we already got a point guard, so no. Could that have actually worked, Kyrie and Chris Paul playing together? I mean, there's a chance Kyrie would have made Chris Paul lose his mind, but in terms of on the court, I mean, Kyrie could certainly, they both could play off the ball. Sure, that's not what they totally would want to do, but they'd be capable of it. I mean, we saw Kyrie play off of LeBron pretty well. And I think defensively, you have Chris Paul defend the better guard, and you have Kyrie defend the worse guard. And yeah, there's an avenue in which that makes sense, and that would have been pretty crazy. But I don't know. Would they have really still traded for CP? Would they even be allowed to, or would there be some weird contract about rookie deals, or so I don't know, like a 20? Was there like a 2010 or 2011 version of the Rose Rule? Maybe, I have no idea. Would that even apply because Kyrie was a rookie? I've got no clue. Another scenario is if it becomes the 8th pick in the draft and then they use the guy they pick as a trade asset. Or potentially the pick itself is a trade asset, I don't know. I mean, Chris Paul was traded in December, so I would like to keep the dates as close as possible in this alternate reality, so I don't think Chris Paul would have been traded for the 8th pick and stuff, but maybe you pick Klay Thompson and then you're trading him for something, or maybe he's in the Chris Paul move. Who knows? It's an extra asset, even if it's not Kyrie Irving or some awesome player, and you don't want to give that stuff away. And it was all to get off of Baron Davis's money to free up cap space for a free agent class that was not really that amazing. Even then, who the hell was going to sign with the Clippers? You know what I mean? I guess Donald Sterling didn't have the self-awareness to know that he was hated around the league, but yeah. So that's it.